Well, hello, my creative friend. Today we are going to work on a delicious snack tutorial, and we're going to learn how to draw this sweet slice of watermelon. So let's get started. We're going to touch on the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner. That's going to bring us our new canvas menu, and we're going to touch on screen size, which will bring us a document that is the size of your iPad screen. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to touch on the icon that looks like a paintbrush. It's going to bring up our brush library, and we're going to highlight Narrander pencil. The next thing I like to do is choose a color that reminds me of working with a graphite pencil. I quite often will choose a black or a dark gray. Now, over here in our layer section, which is this double square, you can see right now that we've started a new document, and we're just going to work on getting a quick sketch of our watermelon. Now, a watermelon slice is kind of a triangle, so I'm going to draw a line and hold, and you'll see that Procreate snaps that line into a straight line as you're drawing. So draw and hold. Let it snap, just come in here and draw an arc. So let's come in here and draw a little side part down again on that straight line for our slice. And then we're just going to attach. And now I'm going to just give myself an idea of where that rind will start and stop. So I know where the green part of the rind will be and where my slice will be as well. And the next thing I want to do is I want to draw it so it looks like there's a bite out of the slice. Now I'm going to come up here to these icons again, and I'm going to touch on the eraser tool, and that's going to bring up my brush library again. If you would come down here to calligraphy, we're going to use the monoline brush today for our eraser. So the monoline brush, I've got it set for, approximately 45%. So now I can come in here and just erase the area where this bite has taken away a piece of the watermelon. Now I'm going to come back to my brushes. I still have that highlighted with my Narrander pencil, and I'm going to connect these lines so that you can see how those teeth marks actually work on the watermelon. So now I'm ready to do my color. Let's come in here to this icon, which is the layers again, and we're going to open up our drawing layer by touching on this end, and we're going to back down on the opacity so that it is going to be easy to see, but it won't be so much in the way as we add color. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is change my layer filter to multiply. So with that, I'm going to click out of that, and now I'm going to add a new layer by touching the plus sign. It brings in a new layer at the very top. I want this layer to be showing up underneath my drawing reference, so I'm just going to touch and drag it down, and now it is underneath the drawing layer. Now we're going to touch on the upper right hand corner, and we're going to bring up our color palette. I have a few colors set here for my watermelon, but watermelon is really easy to figure out colors for, so you can set up colors any way you want. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to choose a dark green for the very, very edge of my watermelon. So I'm going to come back in here to my brush library, touch on that brush icon, then come down to painting right here on that left-hand side, and I'm going to choose watercolor to work on the color on my watermelon. I'm going to turn my watermelon to its side. I'm going to set my brush width to about 5%. And I'm going to just come in here and lay down some of this dark green color. Since this is a watercolor brush, it is going to bring in a little bit of transparency, which is exactly what we want. Now I'm going to come back up to my color, and I'm going to choose this medium green, and I'm going to lay down some more of this color. All right, and now I'm going to come up and get a lighter green and do the same thing. And then just a really light green is going to be next, because if you look at a watermelon, the rind starts really dark and then it almost goes white. Now we're going to start working again with more color, and this time it's going to be the redness of the watermelon fruit itself. I'm going to start with a very light pink here for my beginning parts of my watermelon. And I'm going to enlarge this brush size so we can have some fun with it. And it's going to be a little bit sloppy, but we'll clean it up later. So you're just going to come in and start laying down some of this color. And since this is a watercolor brush, you can see that there is sort of a color buildup. Every time I let up on the brush and I draw again, it allows a little bit more color to show, just like real watercolor. That's enough for this color. Now I'm going to come in and grab another color of this pink and start layering it, kind of overlapping with what I already had going on. Now I'm going to bring down my brush size a little bit as I start working around these bite marks. But the whole time you're working on this, you are thinking a little bit about just where is your light source? The light source is coming in from the upper left-hand corner on this drawing. So things that are going to be over here will be a little bit darker. Now I'm going to come in and draw that best part of the watermelon, which is the very, very tip of the slice. So I want to make sure that this red is as gorgeous and beautiful at the very tip as possible. And since I know now that the light's coming in from over here, I'm just going to make sure that I do have some darker color happening on this side of my watermelon. The next thing we're going to work on is these teeth marks, and you're going to want to just kind of experiment a little bit about where that light's coming in again. And then bring in some of this lighter pink just to have some shading going on. So I'm going to come back in here with a little bit darker red. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little blending. This icon up here that looks like a finger on a hand, that is the blend tool. So if I touch on that, it is going to bring up my brush library again. Right now it is set onto the watercolor brush, which is what I want to use for blending. So I'm going to set my size for about 15%, and you can see I've got my opacity down for about around 64-65%. So let's just come in here and do a little bit of blending. And it is just enough to get the color to have a smooth transition, but you still want to have a little bit of that brush stroke feel in there as well. So how much blending you do is entirely up to you. The blending brush can also help you just touch up some areas where maybe your brush didn't fill in as much as you would have liked it to. Although when you're working with watercolor, sometimes having white space is a happy accident. Having a few areas where you have a little white popping through is sometimes quite nice. And then I'm going to bring up that blending brush size again, and I'm going to play a little bit down here with the blending of the pink and the green. Now the next thing I want to do is come back here to my layers. I'm going to touch here for a new layer, and I'm going to make this layer a clipping mask. So if you touch on layer 3, you're going to get this drop down menu. I want you to touch on clipping mask, and that means that anything I draw, the only places my brush is going to show up is within the area where I have color. We're going to come back into our brushes, and again we're going to be come to the painting brush library, and I want you to touch on fresco. We're going to also find us a very, very dark red, And I am going to set my brush size to about 24, so it's going to be fairly big. But I'm taking my opacity down. It's going to be about 40%. So this is just kind of an abstract thing, and again, no right or wrong. Although I do know, because I've chosen this dark red, that this is something I can use to do a little additional shading on my watermelon. So I will bring a lot of this over here to this side where the light is creating more shadow. And I'm going to get my eraser out and just erase some of this that is on my rind. Now I'm going to think about highlights that would happen on a piece of watermelon. So I am going to come in here to my colors, and I've chosen white here, and I'm going to create a new layer that is going to be on top of this clipping mask. Also, come into your brush library, come to inking, and choose the technical pen. I'm going to still choose a line weight that is about 23%. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm on this new layer. I'm going to think about where that highlight might show up. So we're going to push down and let up on some corners. So I think that highlight might be thick up here, but thinner as it goes down. It's not an outline, it's just a suggestion of where the light might be hitting this to create that highlight. I'm going to put a little bit of highlight here in this corner, and that might be all I need. Come over here to this side of my icons, and I'm going to touch on what we call the magic wand, and it's the adjustments tool. So I'm going to choose Gaussian blur. I'm just going to pull to the side, and you can see that the white that I've drawn is starting to blur. Okay, now I think we can turn off our drawing reference. I'm going to choose my eraser tool. I still have the monoline brush. It's pulled up here to about 100% size, so it'll be easy to have a nice thick eraser. And I'm just going to clean up these side areas. So next I'm going to draw my watermelon seeds. I'm going to come up here to layers and start a new layer for my seeds. I'm going to come over here to my brushes, and I've got my technical pen highlighted still. That'll work out absolutely wonderful. I'm going to bring the pen size down and come up here to our colors again. Now I am going to choose a chocolate brown, and then I'm going to come in here and just make some seeds. All right, now I'm going to just drag and drop my color in here and fill my watermelon seeds. So I want you to come up to your brushes again, and I want you to come down to elements and then touch on hard rain. Next, come back in here to your colors, and I want you to touch on a brown, and then just bring it up so that it is sort of a lighter brown, and we're going to start a new layer. And this layer is going to be a clipping mask, so touch on that. So I have this set for about 7%. We're at 100% opacity. And we're just going to come in here and draw right on top of this, like this. And see how that speckles? It's kind of cool. The more you apply color, the more those speckles show up. So the next thing we're going to do is bring in a little shading. So we're going to, again, we're going to add a layer and make this layer another clipping mask. We're going to come back into our brushes, and we're going to come down to materials and choose noise brush. We're going to bring that brush size down to just about 5 or 6%. You can see here, this is our history of colors that we've been using. This was the brown that I used for my seeds. And then you can just choose a darker color there by pulling it down. We have clipping mask chosen. So we're just going to think about making these seeds look a little bit more three-dimensional. And we can do that by just doing a little scrubbing. Oh, I also have my opacity set here for about 85, 86%. But see how that makes my seed look very much more three-dimensional. That's a very fun thing to be able to do. And the last thing we're going to do is a little bit of a highlight on the seeds themselves. Again, I'm just going to start a new layer on top of shading that we've done. And I'm going to come into our brushes and come to calligraphy and touch on that monoline brush. And I want to bring that down to about 2%. And I'm going to bring in the highlight color that I was using for my watermelon, which is that almost white color. Now remember, our light's coming down from this side, so that highlight will be showing up on this side. And come up here to our magic wand and down to Gaussian blur. We're going to blur this again, just a nice touch of a highlight on our seeds. The last thing we want to do is add a little bit of shadow. So I've got my watermelon highlighted. I'm going to touch on a new layer and drag that layer underneath my watermelon. And then I'm going to come in here to my selection tool, and I'm just going to draw a really quick little circle. Then I'm going to come over here, choose a really dark brown or almost a black, and I am just going to drag that down into my circle. Now I'm going to unselect that, and I'm going to come into my magic wand down to Gaussian blur again, and now I'm just going to blur that. It's looking more like a shadow now. And then the next thing I want to do is come down to that layer and touch on the layer so I can drag down the opacity. And there you go, my friend, a beautiful sweet slice of watermelon. I hope you enjoyed working with me today, learning how to create this watermelon with just a few of the default brushes and tools here in Procreate. I can't wait to see what else you will create in Procreate.